Welcome to BattleFocus with Bruce, co-founder and board member of Ocean Protocol. My name is Bart Kellerman, and I will be your host. Ocean Protocol is a platform that connects providers and consumers of data anonymously and adds valuable new capabilities for quant managers. Data owners and consumers use the Ocean Market application to publish, discover, and consume data assets in a secure, privacy-preserving fashion. In this interview, we will unlock the future of data with a variety of powerful tools that will enable managers to source the most valuable and highly relevant data specific to a trading strategy. Okay, let's get started. Bruce has focused on bringing data and artificial intelligence together since 2013. He has helped to build 20 banks around the globe and has given guest lectures at prestigious locations such as Oxford, the MIT Media Lab up in Boston, and Columbia University. Most interesting, though, to me, is that Bruce was featured in a 2020 full-length documentary, Cryptopia, and presented at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland and CNBC. Well, Bruce, welcome, and I guess the future is here. Can you share with us how Ocean Protocol helps quantitative hedge funds source data?
Hi, Bart. It's great to be here. Thank you very much. Ocean Protocol is essentially another channel where quants can access new data. And just like all the features that conventional providers like Eagle Alpha, for instance, have, where people can search, find, buy, and use the data, Ocean Protocol has a couple of unconventional benefits. First being that because of the way we've structured technology, people can find, use the data in a completely anonymous manner. They can access the data sets without exposing their identity, and that allows them to maintain a certain level of secrecy. The second aspect about Ocean, which is kind of interesting, is the ability to make requests for specific data. So if there's going to be a format of data, a type of data that is requested, we have a feature in our roadmap where people can actually have something like a data bounty, and then anyone on Earth can try to meet that data bounty. And if it's useful for the quants, then that gives them hopefully a little bit of alpha.
Yeah, that's obviously data is very important to quant managers, and finding the right data for a quant strategy is paramount to generate that alpha. There's obviously a tremendous amount of data out there, and the question is, can quant managers source from a broad variety? And you mentioned worldwide, and we'll get into that a little bit later about why you have the ability to touch so many people around the world. When data is acquired by a quantitative manager, obviously they each have unique ways in which to look at that data. And, data to one person is more important than it is to another. And I think you have a sort of a story to help relate exactly why putting a bounty out there or having data distribute to a broad number of different users has different impacts. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you told me before about the Goldcorp mine.
Sure, happy to. So in 1999, an ex-Merrill Lynch executive bought a gold mine, and it was kind of on its last legs. They didn't really know where they were going to drill next. It was expensive, and the geologists were kind of at a loss. And so this guy's name is Rob McEwen. He proposed to open up the data. It was 400 megabytes of data. He said, let's open up to anybody on Earth, and we'll give prizes of up to $1 million to anybody who helps us to identify where we can drill next and make it more efficient so that we don't take losses on dead holes, etc. And that was way against the accepted norms of the industry, where your geologic data is kind of it's your company's secrets and such like that. But he questioned that. And in the end, long story short, 110 sites were identified, 50% were previously completely unknown to the company. This was in the area, like, let's say 10 miles by 10 miles. And 80% of these new sites yielded significant gold reserves. The collaborative process got cut by 3 years in order to find that, and they drilled a lot less dead holes. Long story short, in 20 years, I think last year, they just merged with another gold mine company to become the largest gold producer on Earth. And they continue to use this model in order to open up the other gold reserves that they've acquired by crowdsourcing the data, the geologic data that they had, and trying to make the process just a lot more efficient.
So it's interesting because maybe a lot of different types of organizations had access to that data, but the way in which they filtered through that data, they analyzed the data, resulted in highly valuable information back to the gold mine that were able to then exploit that. And I'm sure there was some kind of collaborative interaction between those data analysts and the gold mine. And I think it's similar to a lot of the data providers out there, people who own data that would love to have the opportunity to make that data available on a global network to be seen by many different organizations, possibly a few of the quant funds that could say, hey, that's a really valuable piece of information. Let me take that, and through our internal analytics, we can leverage that in order to make trades that are more alpha generating than anybody else because of their data science teams, et cetera. So very, very interesting. So, moving on to the next question, you chose to build your business, and this relates back to what I said earlier in terms of a global access to a wide variety of people. What type of data sources, because we have that global availability, what type of data sources do you plan on having available to quantitative-based managers, for instance, or basically to anybody through the Ocean Protocol infrastructure?
I'll talk about what we have right now, and then I'll actually provide a broader context. So right now we have automotive data, consumer transactions, labor force movement, some sentiment analysis for some cryptocurrencies and such like that. We have about 400 data sets in there, and it's essentially open to anybody. There's not an industry specific model yet. We just released this in October. I think one of the main selling points of Ocean Protocol to your audience would be that these data sources, they are kind of honed towards a kind of a GDPR and ESG compliance, where the actual source of the data is providing this raw information to be available. And many of these folks who have published already, sometimes they've collected the data and they're not sure who the right audience could be. So as a provider, they have the data, and now they're just putting it on Ocean Protocol to see, is there any interest in this and all that sort of stuff. What we think is that there is a ton of data that's designed currently to be locked up. And what we're looking to do is have an incentive structure where the data providers are able to provide data that they have collected for somebody who is trying to solve a problem, get alpha, all that sort of stuff. On the other side, we're looking for, of course, the consumers who might be able to provide feedback to these data providers to help them hone the data, the raw data that they might actually have, but it might not be packaged exactly in the way that the consumer would want. And so we're trying to create this two-sided market that allows kind of a data economy to start flowing, where the consumer can go straight to the source and the source can start monetizing something that they were not necessarily able to before, just because the cost of distribution, the cost to package it, just the consumer insights wasn't available to them.
So in essence, what you're really doing is you're simplifying the process to allow somebody who owns potentially valuable information, they're not really sure how much value to ascribe to it, but by allowing them to, let's say, set up a wallet and connect to Ocean Protocol, they can delineate, identify the data internal to their organization, and basically, it's kind of a homegrown solution. You basically set it up and then you put it up on Ocean Protocol, and then it can be viewed by the data consumer, and they can make a choice as to whether or not, because there's obviously some metadata there that will identify what they're looking at, they can then download it and use it. And quant managers, nobody really knows to too much of an extent how they really leverage the data and how they're using the data, but that's not of concern to the provider. He just wants to know whether or not, or he wants to see whether or not anybody sees value in that data. And obviously, raw data is tremendously valuable, more valuable to quant managers than sort of, refined data. So there's definitely an element of value there, and there's not a lot of massaging that has to be done by the data provider in putting that data up there. Is that all? Am I getting this right?
Exactly.
Okay, fantastic. So let's move on to the next question. You chose to build your business on the blockchain. And again, we've mentioned this worldwide accessibility. Can you explain why this infrastructure facilitates better management of data? And I'm sure there's some fancy words like decentralization out there and propagation of the opportunity. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. There's a general reason why blockchain is a better substrate for all this stuff, and then there's two more specific to Ocean Protocol. Number one, the blockchain essentially leverages a complete global network, which is global, permissionless. And the beauty of this blockchain network is that any asset or metadata that's registered into the network is available for anybody. So it's essentially like, think of the domain name system. It's a global registry of URLs, and it's a very valuable registry. Well, in the blockchain network, that registry is globally accessible, free, and there's no intermediary that kind of gets in the way in any form. So it's a pretty freewheeling, but it's a perfect registry of all the potential data sets on Earth. And when there are transactions in a blockchain network, those transactions are stored within the network, and you have essentially a perfect history of where does the data come from and what has happened to that data the moment it's hit the blockchain network. And this goes throughout its history until ad infinitum, until the end, kind of thing. And what that does is it's a very useful thing, especially if you're doing data analysis and you're tweaking your algorithm and models, so that if there's a data set that caused your model to skew in one direction or another, you can actually go back and see where the source data came from that might have skewed your model. This type of provenance is actually perfect for AI, because as soon as the data hits the blockchain network, you have that perfect provenance. So that's kind of a general thing. This is to any blockchain technology, and Ocean leverages that. The two other aspects that are particularly useful is Ocean Protocol at the core are two things. It's access control and orchestration. It's access control to various services that a researcher may need, whether it's computation, data, storage, analytics, or a whole host of other services that you might want to do in order to conduct your analysis and test out your models. And that is what Ocean Protocol is. It's essentially a structure, a tooling, and a grammar that helps to frame data and essentially like turn on and off access to a specific asset if the conditions of use are met. So if you're a data provider, you just actually have to say, under these conditions, I'll open up my data. And if those conditions are met, somebody else on the other side can access the data. And it's fully managed by the network through things like smart contracts and stuff like that. So it's essentially a script that runs. If the inputs are met, then the script can run, it outputs something, and then it's done. Once again, all that is stored in the blockchain, so there's kind of a perfect provenance of it, but that allows for the anonymity I spoke about earlier for both sides to play with. And Ocean does the access control. What that does is it leads to this concept of orchestration. Imagine if you had, let's say, a 20-step process that you wanted to run. Every single step you wanted to be in secret. So you say, access this data set, set up this storage, set up this computation, set up this analytics, and you essentially daisy chain these sets of commands together. You essentially have kind of a data a data processing supply chain, let's just say. And that daisy chaining allows somebody to have kind of a perfect process every single time when they want to run an analysis. And that provenance that's available and through that orchestration, once again, allows for anybody else to come in and audit it if necessary. And this orchestration aspect is very, very powerful because that orchestration process itself is owned by the entity that set it up. There's no platform in the middle. There's no SaaS software in front of you. You can set this up only with, let's say, a Python developer and some quant who's thinking about what do I want to accomplish, hand that over to the developer. And just with Python or smart contract language, you can set up this daisy chain and you own that process completely. And it means it's essentially your intellectual property. So Ocean essentially facilitates that. Number one is this global permissionless, let's say, registry that has kind of a perfect provenance managed by the network, nobody in the middle. And then specific to Ocean are access control to whatever resource that you're trying to get at, and orchestration, where then you can daisy chain that and create actually intellectual property of that process itself.
And this is all done through the blockchain on the network with programmable components, also known as smart contracts. And basically, you could put an order out there and have all the processing done and get exactly what you want, and maybe even feed that into your algorithm as a component of your program.
Yeah, exactly that.
So what struck me as being really interesting is through the pandemic, we noticed that there were violent actions on the market, incredible volatility. And one of the things that came out of the pandemic, I've done a few webinars on this, is timeframes continue to shorten and IoT devices continue to proliferate throughout the world. And real-time data processing, real-time delivery of data is starting to become more prevalent. And everybody is looking at that. Some of the most prominent quants out there are talking about real-time processing of data in order to get a more accurate picture with markets the way with the volatility that's happened. And we certainly expect it to continue and maybe even be more volatile in the future. So that necessitates more monitoring. And should there be IoT devices that directly communicate onto the blockchain with their devices, being able to pull that on a real-time basis could be a really valuable resource to quant managers. So we'll keep an eye on that space. Very, very interesting the way you described that. So definitely big benefits to being on the blockchain. Let's move on to the next question. Why do you expect a marketplace, otherwise known as, I guess, an ecosystem, which is deep data on specific industry verticals in alternative investment data, to evolve, leveraging Ocean Protocol? Can you tell us a little bit about that, like these data marketplaces and what that means?
There's probably two factors that's going to allow data ecosystems to be built on Ocean Protocol. Number one is Ocean Protocol makes the marginal cost of providing these new data sets close to zero. So if you have data and you want to market it to somebody before, you probably would have needed to find a data broker, or a data hunter might have had to have found you, et cetera, to set up that distribution channel. And then you'd have to kind of prepare it, and there'd be a lot of R&D work to just get that data up and running to get to some sort of customer. And you probably didn't even know who the customer was potentially. With Ocean Protocol, the marginal cost of just publishing that data and seeing whether or not somebody else on Earth is interested in it goes close to zero. You can probably publish a data set, depends on which blockchain network we use, but it can be between $2 to $50 to publish a data set. And what this means then is that you're going to have that long tail of data that might have been previously locked up, inaccessible, because the cost to produce it and find the channels to distribute it would have just been exorbitant or not worth it, because the amount that you get for the data wouldn't make any sense. And so we hope that we can initiate this type of Amazon model where instead of 60,000 titles that are available. You now have this long tail distribution of 3 million titles, and somebody on earth wants to buy that obscure piece of data. The second reason why we think an ecosystem around Ocean can form is that we're open source. Our market takes a cut of 0.3% on every transaction. And I think that when we leave 99.7% to the markets, to the consumers, that there's not a lot of margin for somebody else to go after to compete with Ocean Protocol. And the reason why we can do this is we've been funded by the community. We have, we've essentially been very cost effective on this stuff. But with that, it means that anybody can create an Ocean market using our code and pay a very de minimis fee when there are transactions happening. And since October, we now have over 10 markets that are being built, that are now in progress. Those are more industry specific, where you might have IoT data, automotive data, specialization, you might have kind of consumer data, and these are all being set up as we speak, and they'll be announced over the next several quarters. And so I think that these are kind of the two major triggers why we think that this type of ecosystem, A, is ripe, and B, can happen on Ocean, because A, the cost of producing the data and publishing it is close to zero, and B, the protocol as a platform is not extorting, for lack of a better word, let's say 30% of every transaction. And so, more on a meta level, we think that data itself is an asset class. And so if you can allow that asset class to kind of shine and be brought out into the light, then we're also going to be able to apply some financial tools on top of that data once there are transactions based on the first two factors that I just talked about.
So really there are incentives. If you were to paint a picture in your mind, sort of the center point would be Ocean Protocol, and then to the left you would have the data buyer, the quant fund, the regular hedge fund, somebody interested in doing some analysis. They connect directly through this pool, and then on the right side of this image, you would have the data provider. So in essence, you're in the middle, but you're not necessarily buying or selling data. You're just providing the vehicle, right? You are the marketplace provider. You're the picks and shovels of enabling the use of the data on the data buyer side and the providing of data on the data provider side. And the incentives exist for both. Number one, on the data provider side, it's simple, it's direct. You don't have, when you make a transaction, there aren't a lot of obstacles in the way. There aren't a lot of hops, if you will. And on the data buyer side, he has anonymity, an extensive, what should I say, marketplace to buy. And another incentive, which you mentioned earlier, and I just want to reemphasize because I think it's hugely valuable, and that is this concept of the bounty, right? Where a quant manager is looking for a very, and we get this a lot, there are very specific data requirements, and some data, some quant funds have not been able to find exactly the data they want. But what Ocean Protocol would facilitate them being able to do is to create the specifics in terms of time frames, in terms of the manner in which that data is available, or the format of the data, the different types of characteristics of the data. They can specify that and basically send it out, and the receiving nodes or the global infrastructure that you've built can be seen by a broad set of data producers, data providers, in order to meet that requirement. And then you would use the technology, the protocol, i.e., which is sort of the money that is the Ocean Protocol, to buy and sell this data. So you have incentives on both ends, and if you have that, that should proliferate the marketplace. Did I get that straight?
Pretty much. If I could add to that, Ocean Protocol essentially acts as a market commons, in the sense that we're not something like, let's say, an Uber or an Amazon in the middle per se. We're more of the facilitating gathering space where both providers and consumers can meet.
Exactly. And I don't think there's really a foundation or architecture that's more conducive to that than what we have on the blockchain. Just as sort of as an aside, we're all caught up in our conventional activity on a daily basis. We're always looking for new opportunities, more efficient, better data, better processing, what have you. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes of the crypto space, the sphere, the crypto world, if you will. You're heads down in the middle of it. Could you give a sort of an overview? What do you see on the evolution, the development, the technology side of things? Sort of peel back the cover a little bit for some of these quant managers and data providers. Is there still a lot of enthusiasm? Is there a lot of development? Are the highways, we keep hearing about how these big highways are being produced. How is the development process, and do you see it growing? Do you see it stable? Where are we with that?
So I guess I can answer from two different perspectives. Number one is the amount of data being generated through these blockchain networks is immense. And so a lot of traditional traders have come into the crypto world and have been able to make pretty huge gains because the data that they have and the transparency that the blockchain affords gives them the ability to apply some of the tools they've used in the traditional world, but they have better data. And so we have seen a migration of people in the traditional world coming into blockchain to trade on the cryptocurrency because of this kind of global transparent network. On a broader perspective, how is the space moving? It is growing very, very fast. We had a market crash in, I believe, late 2017, early 2018. And since then, all the teams have been building. We've had a little bit more correction recently with some tweets from Elon Musk and a couple other more broad announcements and such like that. But that has not dampened the progress and the momentum of blockchain and crypto in any way, because all of the work that had been done since 2018, now that's hitting its stride. All the teams are very well financed, and the products are now ready to go. And so we're at the stage where we actually have the adoption. So even if there is potentially people who are talking about crypto in a more negative sense and such like that, the amount of momentum happening because the product launches are happening, I see we still have a long ways to go. We're only at the beginning, and the forward momentum is very strong.
Well, I think we're getting pretty close, especially when I take a look at the data sets that you have available on Ocean and the plan going forward. I know you're working with municipalities, you're working with governments, you're working with institutions in order to populate valuable information for people. And I think it's months away from getting to the point where it's there's tremendous value there, and there already is some value there. But I would say stay tuned for what's coming. I can certainly attest to those comments that you just made regarding the enthusiasm of the marketplace. I just attended last weekend the crypto conference that took place in Miami, and they had 13,000 attendees, and it was half indoors, half outdoors. They had so many people. They had tents, booths, you name it, and over 200 vendors. And many of those were on their third, fourth, fifth funding rounds, and really generating tremendous revenue. So well on their way to being successful companies. So I think that so the groundwork, the infrastructure on top of the blockchain is really starting to get become much more secure, and many additional companies are showing progress, and that's got to be good for you guys as well. And I know that Ocean Protocol has done, I think you're available now on 13. For people wanting the Ocean Protocol coin to invest in that, I think there are now, you're on, is it 13 different exchanges now?
Oh, if people want to actually get that Ocean token, I think we're on 60 different exchanges at this stage.
60. Wow. Okay. So just to get a little technical with everyone, there is the vehicle that is used to buy and sell data is called the Ocean token. So if you set up a wallet, you populate it with Ocean token, and then you can leverage, then you can buy the different data sets using the Ocean token. And those tokens are all also used in order to reward data providers with creating and listing data sets. And when they sell them, they sell and they receive tokens in return, which they can use to then buy other data sets or basically trade it on the open market. So very interesting concept here, and that's sort of paramount to how many of these new businesses function and how they drive demand and how they drive their economy forward. So basically, we're turning a little bit more towards the data provider aspect of this. We are going to be announcing a data competition that will reward data providers with Ocean tokens, and we will be announcing that. That's still to come. In essence, we've done a good job in overview, and thank you for that overview, Bruce, and thank you to Ocean Protocol. We look forward to connecting back with Ocean Protocol on Tuesday, July 13th at an upcoming Battle Blitz webinar. So again, thank you very much for everybody's time today. Take care and goodbye.